Hi, I'm Jake. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing the install of these ITBs on my 1973 Datsun 510. I've removed the original twin-SU carbs and have fitted these CBR 600 throttle bodies. In the previous episode, I fabric cobbled up an aluminium intake manifold and some trumpets. And today we're going to be continuing on with the install. So this is where we left it at the end of the last video. So I've cobbled up my aluminium intake manifold. I've got some trumpets, only 2 made from ASA, 2 from PLA, so I need to print some more of these ASA ones. I also need to do a cable throttle conversion. So you can see the rod down the back here. These original carbs are rod, whereas this one will require a cable. What else do we need to do? We need to run some fuel lines and a high pressure fuel pump. Maybe stick a fuel filter in there too while I'm at it. We need to run a return line to the tank, because this is like a dead-headed system. And then once that's done, we've got some wiring to do. So obviously need to wire up these injectors, the throttle position sensor. I've also got an intake, air temperature and water temperature. We get to decide where or how I'm going to do that. So yeah, let's get started. I'm going to start with the throttle cable because I know what I'm doing with that. So what I'm going to do is use this, it's actually a bike brake cable, which I think should be strong enough. Doesn't need to be overly strong, I don't think, for a throttle cable. And down in here, you can see it fits in there, twizzles all the way around, and it's going to fuck off up over here. So I need to make a bracket that I think I'm going to hang off these bolt holes here. That's going to come up and sort of go at a 90-degree here, and then I'll put a threaded fitting through it so I can adjust the tension on this thing. So this is the progress I've made so far. This little stainless jobby here, it's made of like 3mm thick stainless, I think. As you can see, I've got one of the mounting holes in place. Just need to poke the other one over here. And then I need to drill and tap a hole on this side for, reach it, a fitting like this, if you've got focus. And then that will allow me to tension the cable. You can see it's sort of positioned above. It's going to be quite far off to the side, sort of over here. No, about there. Yeah, making a bit of progress. The only problem is this material is bloody hard. Trying to drill the hole through there was a nightmare. So I'm really hoping I can actually tap it. If I can't tap it, what I'll do is I'll just drill the hole out oversized and then tack weld a stainless nut on. This is all stainless then, just to thread this into. Yeah, making progress, not taking too long. Here we have the little throttle cable bracket in a functional state. So bolted on over this side with these 2 bolts. Got the little adjuster mounted. I'm going to trim this excess corner off at some point. Yeah, cable is in, fitted. Does it work? So I don't know if I can actuate this. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, look at that. Good. We're getting there. Still need to have a think about how I'm going to attach this cable to the throttle pedal at the other end. What I have done actually, might be of interest. So I've marked some pen on here, and then if I pull this, some pen at the other end, so I know how much travel I need to go to full throttle, which will assist me when I'm setting up the throttle pedal to know sort of where to mount the cable in order to get the correct amount of pull at this end. So I mounted it to where the rod mounts, I'd end up with a very small amount of pedal travel and it might be a bit twitchy. So had a bit of a think about the pedal end of the cable, and this is what I've come up with. So I've basically got a bolt with a hole drilled through it, a little crimp connector and a rose joint, or a Heim joint if you're that way inclined. Then you basically just assemble this lot together, like that. And then I don't know if I'm going to weld a nut onto the pedal, or I might make a sort of band that wraps around the pedal, because the pedal itself is like a round section. So I might make a bit that sort of goes round like this, with the Heim joint in the middle here, rose joint with a bolt through it. Well, tack that to the pedal, or I might just tack a nut straight to the pedal and bolt straight onto it with that. Not made my mind up yet. I'll take the pedal out and take a look. because I think either way I'm going to need to do some welding with it. But yeah, I thought this was quite a neat little solution. And that's what this little assembly looks like once it's all together. So you can see how it'll work. It'll just bolt onto the pedal at this end, and then I'll put another one of these in the bulkhead. So I will weld a nut, to drill a hole, weld a nut in the bulkhead to thread this into, and then I have to cut this, obviously cut these cables down and stuff. But yeah, quite simple. Do the job. So inside the car, I made a little bit of progress. I've just whipped off the throttle pedal. I've also whipped off this jobby, which is in the engine bay, which is the sort of bell linkage for the throttle linkages. Moved all those out the way, but I've hit a speed bump. So this area of bulkhead up here, there's quite a horrible looking hole in it. So this is the speedo cable, and that normally goes through here, and then the throttle linkage goes through this one. Just move this out of the way for now. But yeah, this hole is a little bit crusty. Annoyingly, that's pretty much exactly where I want the throttle cable to come through. So just gonna stick a little patch in there before we carry on. Just a bit annoying that I have to, really. So I've cleaned up the hole a little bit and getting ready to make my CAD template. So what I do is just put the card over the hole and just push it from the other side with the thumb. As you can see, it leaves a nice outline. So I'm going to cut out and replicate in metal. And that should then fit quite nicely in that hole. Whenever I'm cutting out little pieces of metal like this, I like to clean the metal with these paint removal discs. Really good, really quick. But always do it before you cut out this small piece. Because holding onto this is a lot easier than trying to hold onto that and clean it with one of these without taking your fingers off. Just sorting out the throttle cable and cracked out the TIG again, and what I've done is I've welded a nut into the end of this tube. Look at the old TIG out. Not terrible welds. Forgot how quiet DC TIG is versus AC. Very peaceful. But yeah, it's basically weld the adjustment fitting thingy in the end of here. I'll weld the nut for it anyway. And then what I'm going to do is cut this at an angle, and then get the old spicy hot glue gun out and stick it to the bulkhead, because that will allow me to have a better cable angle going down to the pedal. So not sure how well you can see it, but down here we've got my new sort of cable mount welded on. It's basically just a bit of tube, and I showed it in the last clip, with a nut welded in the end at an angle. It's currently got a bolt in it to help me plot where that's going to intersect with the throttle pedal. So yeah, slowly getting there on the throttle pedal. Just finished welding this tab onto the throttle pedal and grinding it down. Oh, not sure I'm going to do this with one hand. But basically, this is going to bolt through there and through the hole. Tighten that up. And this rose joint will still be able to move even if this bolt's tightened up. Just give it a little bit of movement in every direction. So yeah, time to bolt it all back in the car and see what it looks like. And then I'll have to shorten this cable. I think I'll do the outer first, then poke the inner all the way through, mark up where the pedal is and stuff, and shorten the inner too. So I've trimmed down this outer throttle cable, so it's in its little holder on this end, goes into the new welded thing on that end, along with the little adjuster. You can see that. I've trimmed it too long at the moment. And I also got a bit annoyed and took the old carbs off. Finally caved in, took check cables off and stuff. So I hope I don't have to refit those. But anyway, back to the throttle cable. So yeah, roughly in position. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to 3D print some little, I don't know what you call them, hats to go on the end of these cables, just so they fit nicer in the adjusters, because they're a bit loose at the moment. And then I think I'm going to use this bolt hole here, basically route it over there, put a little clip on the rocker cover, then probably shorten it a little bit more and get it over there. So just going to nip back into the house, get the old 3D printer out, print some little top hats, or whatever they were going to be called, from TPU to fit on the ends, and then a little ASA bracket in the middle here to hold this in place nicely. And once I'm fully happy with the outer, then I'll cut the inner down to suit the pedal. So I'm back from the 3D printer, and I've printed two of these little ends, I don't know what you call them, rubber ends. So that's nice and secure in the adjuster now. Same for the end that's at the bulkhead. And also a nice little bracket on the cam cover, just to hold the cable in place. And yeah, I think this is the routing I'm going to go with. I've also trimmed the inner down and fitted it inside the car. So let's go take a look at that if we can. Unfortunately, I'm not very happy with this setup, so ignore my shitty welding. But so you can see the cable coming through the bulkhead down to the pedal, and yeah, I've just fitted a return spring on there as well. But basically, I'm not happy with this setup with where this is. I think I'm going to move it up the pedal a little bit, just because when it's basically at idle, the pedal all the way up, the line that goes from this cable to this pivot point is basically a straight line. And what that means is pulling on this cable doesn't move the throttle pedal. And I think, so basically here, I can wiggle that, and that doesn't really move the throttle at all. And what that means is that the throttle return springs on the throttle itself are not strong enough to like nicely pull it back to completely closed on the throttles. So yeah, I think I'm going to cut that tab off and move it up the throttle a little bit. So in case the diagram helps you understand it a little bit better, it certainly does for me. This is the setup we've got. So, I mean, this was intended because what this means is that a very small, like if you move the pedal here, you basically end up with a almost perpendicular to this cable movement at this pivot point, which means the first bit of pedal travel doesn't really pull the cable very much, which means there'll be an insensitive pedal, which means it should be quite easy to not like drive just off idle. Shouldn't be too twitchy. But the problem is I think this is too close to this setup. So what I'm going to do is basically move this tab. I'm going to cut the existing one off, which will then make it shorter, and I'm going to move it up a little bit. So if I can find my pen, we should be somewhere up here. And then that means because there's a bit more of an angle here, as you pull this cable back, it will actually pull the throttle back. Because in this scenario where it's basically straight, it doesn't matter how hard you pull this cable, it will never move the pedal. Whereas this one here, if you were to pull this cable back, it would bring the pedal sort of further down until it wasn't a straight line. So yeah, cut that tab off, try again. There we go. Hot glued another tab on, and we'll try again. There we go. That's a much better setup. So you can feel about there where the cable goes tight. I mean, I think you can still push the cable the other way, but yeah, there's a very definitive, like when it picks up the slack in the cable before you start opening the throttle. It's not a huge amount of pedal travel. Yeah, you can see the cable slack at the end now, which means the throttles are going to close properly. Maybe you can tighten that up a little bit. But for now, it's pretty good. So I'm calling this throttle cable good enough for now. I need to come back and finish off that bracket at some point. I also need to grind back the old tab off the pedal and paint the pedal and stuff. But it functions. It's there. I need to make a pedal stop as well to stop it. Not when you push the pedal, but when you release it, I need to put a stop at that end as well. Just so it feels a bit nicer, so the pedal always goes back to the same position. But anyway, calling that done for now. It works, it'll do. Fuel system. So currently I run a carburetor stuff. So it's like low pressure pump, 3 PSI, whatever it is. So I'm gonna fit an injection pump. I've got this Magneti Marelli inline jobby, one of those, if anyone's interested. And got myself a fuel filter, Marla one of those. And I've got myself a load of this stuff. 8mm, I don't know what it coated in, zinc coated steel, mild steel, just because it's cheap. Pick up like 5 meters of that for 15 quid or whatever it is. So yeah, going to make some lines. So I need to make a feed and return. So it's going to go from the tank to the pump, through the filter, all the way to the front, to the throttle bodies, and then return straight all the way back to the tank. So yeah, 8mm diameter both ends, 8mm on the outlet, 10 on the inlet. So I need to adapt that to the tank. But yeah, gonna make a start with the. What do I want to start with this? Probably mount the pump and the filter first, actually, because that way I know where the lines need to go. Yeah, let's make a start with that. So under the back of the car, this thing is the cross member, and that's the sort of under the rear seat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the pump over here onto this surface on the cross member, and then fuel filter is going to come over on this side on the bulkhead. Didn't want to mount the pump here because it could be quite annoying. Then the plan is to basically follow this original fuel line down to the front of the car, and the feed for the pump will come under the cross member or over it, depending which way you're looking. Here, and then into the pump, twist around here, filter, front of the car. Then in return, will just basically follow the original line back to the tank. So yeah, this jobby over there, this jobby over there. Shout out to my friend Nate. He gave me these door cards. I went down to his house for a barbecue the other week and had a lovely time, and he gave me these door cards. Quite a bit nicer than the sort of scabby ones I've got now. But yeah, gonna whip the rear seat back out so I can reach the tank, so I can start doing some more fuel system stuff. Forgot I'd done this for a moment, but in the past what I've done is basically get some polythene sheet and some tape, and I've sealed this bulkhead, because on these cars the fuel tank is in the boot, and I think anyone who's driven one of these knows the smell of fuel can be quite strong. So yeah, this really helps with that. And now I need to rip it off. So this is the back of the fuel tank, and as you can see I've got 2 fittings on there already. So this is the return and this is the feed. So I don't need to wire anything to the tank or anything, just need to adapt these hoses to something a bit more suitable. And I've already got some wiring in here for the fuel pump, because I have got an electric ticker pump up here somewhere. So already got an electric pump, so should be pretty easy. I'll probably have to extend these wires a bit. I'm just send them through the floor somewhere. And yeah, hopefully it shouldn't be too much work. So feed and return. So before I disconnect any of the fuel lines, I'm just going to drain the tank. I'm going to do that with using the existing fuel pump, really. It's probably the easiest way. I've wired it in so I can prime it without having the engine on. There we go. There you go. I'm going to drain this fuel out. I've honestly no idea how much is in the tank. About a quarter of a tank according to the gauge. It should be 10 litres or so. So what I'll do is I'll fill this jerry can, transfer it into the daily, fill it again. I think that should hopefully see me about done. This is the plan for mounting the fuel pump and fuel filter. So I've just got the old 3D printer out again. I've printed these TPU blocks. So yeah, it's a bit rubbery, pretty rigid though. Not sure we can see that, but countersunk holes on the front for some M6 bolts, along with a slot that goes through for this Jubilee clip hose clamp. So yeah, that'll be for the fuel pump, and for the fuel filter, very similar but just scaled down to suit. I've also 3D printed a little spacer under there to stop this Jubilee clip potentially damaging this filter, because I don't know how thick that metal is. This one's got a rubber sleeve around it, so it should be protected as well. Yeah, I'll just drill some holes and stick some rib nuts in. That'll be those mounted. So here we have the fuel pump and fuel filter mounted under the car. So as I mentioned before, fuel pump is on the cross member, fuel filter is just on the bulkhead. Next step, we're making a start on the lines. So where this line is over here is sort of the route I'm going to follow. So it'll go from the filter here over there, and then where that crosses under the cross member is where I'm going to get the feed from, and then the return will basically follow the stock fuel line, but a bit less scabby hopefully. So pump and filter is mounted, and just thinking about fuel line routing. So the original one comes through here, which I am not going to do. So originally there was a mechanical pump here, which is why it arrives there. But I'm not doing that, so I'm going to send it up the bulkhead over here, across behind the engine. I think this little bracket here, which is where the throttle linkage used to mount, I think I'll just mount something in that place to hold the end of the hard line. And then I'll just do some flexies from here to there. So yeah, let's get to it. I've managed to remove the old fuel line, which is this thing here. Bit of a bastard to get off. It's only really held in place with a couple of these little tabs that are bolted on, and a couple of little metal tabs that sort of bend around. But even still, having to go all the way from sort of behind the rear axle, all the way through the suspension and stuff, up into the engine bay, did make it a little bit difficult. Just how difficult this was to get off, I don't think I'm going to be able to do the whole run in a single line. Not without having the car properly up in the air and probably taking the subframe and some other bits off. So I think I'll probably have a couple of joins in mine. But yeah, now I've got this. Starting from about here. So this is the bit where it goes around the bulkhead under there where the fuel filter is. So I basically need from that section forward. I don't need to go all the way to this corner of the car. I'm going to go up the bulkhead. Yeah, this is fun. Making a start on the hard line from the fuel filter to the sort of engine bay. I'll show you what I'm doing. I can't really film what I'm doing because it's under the car and there's not much clearance. So not a lot to see. Basically, I've used some welding rod to work out where I need to bend, because it's much easier to use welding rod, and then just duplicate that onto hardline. So yeah, slowly making my way through it. No idea how long I've been messing about under here, a couple hours at least. But I've got this section of the fuel line sorted. So if I can point. So we've got the return line here that just goes whoop, and then all the way to the front of the car. The feed comes out from under the cross member 2 into the pump, round through here, through the filter, and then to the front of the car as well. I've sorted the connections on the tank, if I can get up. Oh, I'm getting old. So in here I've got the fuel lines, as well as a pre-pump filter just tucked in behind here. So yeah, making my way towards the front. So that's everything up to the front bulkhead done now. So yeah, front. So not sure if I showed this yet or not, but this is what I've been using to cut the hard line. So it's just a little brake line cutting tool. All you do is just tighten it onto the tube and just spin it around and then just keep tightening it until it cuts through. It leaves, if this will focus, quite a nice finish on the end of these tubes. It's quick, it's quiet. Yeah, all around pretty good. So I'm up at the 3D printer again, just 3D printing some little grommets to fit into this bracket for the fuel lines to fit into. They're going to look a little bit like this. And what I'm going to do is a nice little trick where you can use Cura to stop at a certain layer. And then what I'm going to do is fit this little PLA spacer in, which will basically act as the support between these two sides. The benefits of doing this over just relying on the TPU supports. Ooh, there we go. Perfect timing. The benefit of doing this is that the PLA won't stick to the TPU. TPU is a bit of a bastard for sticking to itself, so it's impossible to get the supports out nicely. Whereas doing it like this, I'll just print on top and I can just snap that bit of PLA out when it's done. I did put a little break in it, so it's pretty easy to split that. Yeah, perfect support. Obviously if you had a printer that did multiple filaments and stuff, this would be redundant, but yeah, just a little tip. Here it is off the printer, and as you can see I've broken the PLA support off, and absolutely perfect overhangs, which is something that is pretty much otherwise unachievable with this printer and TPU. Just a little tip. So here we have the fuel lines all complete, basically. So you can see I've got the flexi lines going from the fuel rail itself back to these hard lines, which are mounted on this bracket I made. Yeah, just routed over the top for now. No clips for now, as I need to take this manifold back off to do a few other bits and pieces, but yeah. And the hard lines disappear down there under the car to meet up with the other fuel lines. So yeah, been over, spanner checked all the fittings. So basically the only ones that are left to fit are the ones that are here. So slowly getting, so that's throttle cable and fuel lines done. What's the next job? I don't know, but you're about to find out. So as you just saw, I've taken off the intake manifold and the exhaust. Next job is going to be to wrap this exhaust. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to paint it first, wait for that to dry, wrap it in this stuff. I'm mainly interested in the tops where it's closest to the carb. Not really too fussed about down here, like where the lambda sensor is or anything. Might do the collector, I might not. This is probably the areas where it's going to get hottest, but it's quite far away from everything else. So I think I'll start at the top and basically do these bits. And then depending on how much of this I've got left, because I've only got one roll, then I'll see how far down I go. I'm fully aware this is controversial. A lot of people say this will destroy the exhaust. And to be honest, I just don't really care that much. This is just a cheap exhaust, mild steel, which is why I'm going to paint it first. Worst case, if it gets ruined by this, then I'll just make another one of these out of stainless, weld one up myself. I think for that one, I definitely will get the flange water or laser jet cut, because yeah, fuck making that big flange out of stainless, 1/2 inch thick. Not about that. But yeah, time to do some painting. So I've never wrapped an exhaust before, so this is going to be a learning exercise for me. Yeah, stuck in. I'm going to start at the head end and work my way down, because to me that feels like the easier way of doing it. Because I'll probably have to cut it off the roll when I get somewhere down here so I can thread it through. We'll give it a go. I saw some people like to get this stuff wet before you wrap with it, but I think it depends on the type. This stuff feels very supple anyway, so I'm not going to bother getting it wet. And I'm just going to start by wrapping it around here once or twice. So that wasn't too bad. Yeah, it got a bit awkward threading the whole wheel of stuff through there. So I snipped it off at the end. I think that's about right, because then what I can do is basically do all 4 together from there downwards. If I decide to do that, I'll do the others first at the top and then worry about down the bottom here. So yeah, I've got some metal cable ties to go on as well. Just use these plastic ones to hold it in place while I was going. I think it looks okay. Like I said, never done this stuff before. There's a reasonable overlap. It's tight everywhere. Doesn't feel like it's gonna come off. So yeah, pretty happy with that. So here we have the sort of primary section of this exhaust wrapped up. This is really all I need to do, but I am going to continue. I'm just going to go down and do this section here as well. So from where these join, just down to past here. Not going to go all the way down to the lambda, just, yeah, up there. Doesn't seem too difficult. I think I've done an okay job. I don't really know. It's going to reduce temps. That's all that really matters. It's not perfect. And to be fair, it looks quite nice as well. I've seen some before that are quite a light colour, whereas this stuff's like basically black. So it looks pretty good too. Here's the final product. So I think you saw before when I wrapped these. I've now continued that on all the way down to there. I think I've done an okay job. My first time doing this. I think it looks okay. This bit in particular was a bit of a pain because it tapers down in size quite a bit, and it just did not want to flow nicely around there. I did end up getting it a bit wet. Didn't really seem to make any difference, to be honest. But yeah, all cabled up. And what I've done is on the ends here, I've snipped them down and then folded them back on themselves and tucked them in. So there's no, same with that one there, no sharp edges on any of these. So hopefully I won't cut my hands. The one question mark I do have is whether I apply more of the high temperature paint over the top of this wrap. I've seen people in the past sort of sealing exhaust wrap with high temperature paint just to stop as much moisture and dirt and stuff getting in there. Not decided yet. I'll go and do some Googling while I'm eating my dinner and make a decision. I had a think and decided it would be best to paint this, mainly because I've got the paint here in the garage and figured it might help, if nothing else, to keep the fibres down. Because like all over these like flanges and this workbench and stuff, there was little fiberglass fibres everywhere. Even wearing gloves, it was pretty itchy. So yeah, just giving it a very, very heavy coat of paint all over. You can sort of see it's still wet on the flanges where I've oversprayed. All the ties have been painted black as well, so they don't stand out anymore. And yeah, hopefully once this dries, it will keep the dust down. Yeah, overall, I think that looks pretty good. You're not really going to see this anyway because it's down basically under the car. But the end that's up near the headers at least looks pretty good, I think. I caved in and painted the bottom bit. I couldn't leave it. Looking good. Time to fit a nice shiny new gasket. Cleaned up the mating surface on this, and I'm going to put the exhaust back in. Here we are a little while later. I've got the now wrapped exhaust on, got the manifold and the throttle bodies back on. I have 3D printed out the second set of trumpets in ASA now. So this will be the sort of final piece. I've routed the fuel lines, including some nice little cable guides on here to stop it chafing and moving about. I have, so fuel lines are completely done now. Put a little breather filter on here, as well as one, if you can see it under there, there is another breather filter for the block. So I think I'm getting there. I think the only thing really left to do is wiring. I'm not overly happy with these vacuum lines. So there's one per carb that's got a little restrictor in that goes to the ECU, and then one per cylinder that goes to the brake booster, which is this black line at the back here, and also to the fuel pressure regulator there. Yeah, getting there. This is looking pretty complete now, and overall pretty happy with how it's looking. So that's where I'm going to leave this video for today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider subscribing and stick around for the next part in this series where I'll get the wiring done and hopefully fire this car up for the first time. So yeah, catch you in the next one.